Good evening and good afternoon, and wherever you are in this wide, wonderful, beautiful world that we live in, you are very welcome to the Soft and System Size to Sales. And welcome, my good friend Shay Lynch. We're here every week. We're discussing a different topic. And this week, we're talking about adaptive change to agile strategies dominating sales leadership for 2024. So, Shay, let's go straight into it. Normally, I'll have an introduction, but again, as usual, I cannot find the bit of technology. But that
That's because
doesn't.
you're not very clever, Jason. I'll do a run. I'll run through with you someday when you and teach you a little bit of technological stuff, right?
Yeah,
No
if you could.
problem, right? Don't charge much. Well, no, very great to be here, Jason, as always. And I believe this is a very, very important topic at this time of year for many, many reasons. Like it's the start of the year. We're talking about strategy implementation. We're
Mm,
talking about a world where world where things change a lot. So everything has to be precision. You need to execute your strategy model, your absolute understanding of what you need to do. It needs to be executed with precision, Jason. And
yeah,
that involves not just you and your business and everyone in it, but also your customers. And we were talking offline before this, your customers too. So it has to be precision. And I like to say as well with that, Jason, it's not about confusing precision with rigidity. Precision in terms of how you adapt and react to what the targets and metrics and market are telling you.
yeah. Wow, that's a huge thing that you just said there. There's so much in it, huge amounts of what you've just said. So where do we should start the conversation? I think it's the customer's customer that we really need to have that agile strategy behind that, because we have to see the pain points behind their issues and how they sell to their customers, and maybe they're looking at the perspective of, if we go into organizations maybe as leaders and really analyze the whole business, how are their customers buying from them? Because once we understand that, then we can work out the strategy back to how they can more effectively work with their clients and with their customers. And as we know, that fluctuates and changes throughout the year. And when we speak about agile, we have to speak about agile strategies behind that, because it's a moving target all the time. So we have to start thinking all this strategic way of doing it. And the only way we can get to that is asking really good questions all the time and making sure that we're on top of it, so we can understand everyone's pain points as well.
Yeah, and that's it, Jason. And I like that that you're talking about the customer's customer, because when you develop a relationship with a client, first and foremost, you want to make sure your service is top notch. You're building trust as you grow. It doesn't happen overnight, but you want to be in a situation over the course of a period of 6, 12 months or whatever it is, that you're into that account management and growing the
Mm,
account. And then from there, Jason, is like having better conversations. Well, this is what we do for you now. This is what you've asked us to do. What else can we do for you? How can we help you help your customers? And the way I always present this to my clients, Jason, is like, we're all part of the same supply chain.
yeah.
We're all in it together. So why don't we work together to make it better and protect that end user? And
Oh,
and that's what. Hey, Oren, how's it going? Welcome,
Good. How are you guys
greetings.
doing?
And we're just talking about how you protect your customer's customer. And that this is part of the agile approach to sales leadership in going to that extended enterprise and supply chain model where you're all work together to protect that end user. And I believe that's very, very important because the world is tough. You want to protect those relationships as best you can. You want to play in your customer's playground so much that even if the competition knocks on the door, they won't open it. They won't entertain it because you're so valuable. You're their extended arm in their pain relief for their customers.
and we have another guest here as well. So, just to give the complete concept to where we actually are right now, is we're speaking about adapting change, agile strategies to the sales and sales leadership, and we discussed about our customer's customer, and it's having the right approach to really understand what's going on in their world and really making sure that you've got a really good idea. And I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. I've just been learning other strategies and methodologies in not consultative selling. It's a more of a direct, aggressive approach, and I'm really on the fence with it as well. Challenger sell, and look, I'm on the fence with it. So I read the book and I've learned the strategy, but I think it just works in certain situations, but not all situations. I'm on the fence with it. I think it's a little bit too aggressive in some parts. But
do you know what the problem is? Once your buyers recognize it, they get resentful. So if they've read that book, they're going to pick you off in 2 seconds. So I didn't mean to jump in, by the way.
No, that's all right.
It's kind of to me, it's one of those things where I kind of go, oh man, the world has moved on. You know, I think that on our last chat, I mentioned something about, the need to build business cases, right? If you can't build a business case, then what are you doing in the room? You're in the wrong room. And as far as your customer's customer goes, Jason, I think that you have absolutely killed it. You're so smart. And it comes down to this. So the only way that I could become an insider with the largest retailers and department stores in the world, largest food guys, all the rest of it, I had to go into their stores, and I would walk up to their store managers. And by the way, I would let the head office people know that I was doing it. How about that? And I would walk in and I would say, hi, I know you're busy. I know this is a terrible time and I apologize, but would you walk me around the store and would you give me your bird's eye view of how it is that your customers approach you in a live environment and the things you're doing right now to make that better?
Very smart. Yeah, I totally concur. And that's something that I always believe before you do anything else for them. Like, we're in the training, coaching, consulting industry, and that's part and parcel of the process. But our customers should be doing that as well. Is to really understand like the 360 view of where they actually are and what they're actually doing. So you have to understand that. I always like to understand their acronyms as well, in brief. Like, I hate them I hate those, but you have to understand them. But if you want to be an expert in someone else's world, you have to understand them, their terminologies in a way, how they think to a certain degree, but not all of it. But it's just so you can reflect with them and hopefully be in the world. But if you're in a specific industry, you should already know those, maybe those challenges around that. Yoram.
So it's interesting. I think you actually are hitting on a major point that people have to remember. When I read the Challenger sale, I was probably less impressed because I've already been trained. I've been fortunate enough to be trained to do that already. I think in essence, it's the same with when you say things and they sound canned and they've heard it before. That's the problem. And like Patrick, if they've read the book, they know what's coming. But the actual thing that's behind it is you're adding value. You are distinguishing yourself from somebody else. So it's the same thing. I once sold briefly, I sold for a company and they sold industry information. And you would sometimes sell this database with a lot of tech and things coming along. Very cool. But they would obviously be selling it to people who may not be experts in this industry. There's people who are functioning in multiple industries and they need to keep that. So one of the things they would do is sometimes pitch into an industry they weren't comfortable with to provide their service. So one of the things we put together was a cheat sheet with questions. And the idea was that you had 6 questions. I said, ask them all, because the chances are they know all 6. They said, why was it they know 5 and not the 6th one? I said, can you imagine how good you look when you are going there and you're asking questions that sound like you've done your homework? Then you ask them that question that they haven't even thought about and they should be thinking about. Firstly, by asking the first 5, you're way ahead of the competition. Asking the first 6, but they don't have industry experience, but they're thinking of ways I shouldn't be. Like, wow, I didn't think of that. That's something that we should really be aware of. Or, we're positioned to take advantage of that. That's really interesting. Thank you for that. That is, I think, what the Challenger sale is trying to say, is the fact that they feel, we've spoken about this so many times during 2023, that I think is what you're trying to do. So I think there's another one, the Challenger customer. So yeah, I found it a little canned. I think, like most sales books, you could probably lose the first and last chapter. But the fact that you're getting them to think in a different way. And I've seen this with somebody selling copiers, right? They'd walk in and he showed me what he does, and I was fascinated by this. They have, you have the big copy and the little one, right?
Yeah.
So he was saying the big copiers, and he sees the little ones on the desks. He said, by the way, I mean, they're good machines. We're a gold dealer, which means we sell buckets. So person will go, that basically means you sell a lot of them. He said, exactly. We're the biggest in the Northeast for those and those. Those little guys cost you about 25 cents to print, whatever it was. This one cost you 3 cents. So really think. And the fact is that it's a little thing, but it's like they may or may not change. Or he'll try and give them advice. He said, when you do this, you're paying for color. Just when you're setting up a document, you can set up in such a way that you just, let's say you've got 5 color sheets out of 36. You're only paying for those 5 color, not the other ones. Because you think you're printing them black and white, but you're not. It's grossly, grossly simplifying. But it's the same thing. You're adding value, right? Or are you doing those? So do those actually in grayscale? You may not even. It'll solve your problem. Like, great. Or have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? He's talking to them about something so mundane, like paper, right? Which we just didn't even think about. But he's making them think in a different way. And therefore, they're going to be much more open to him when he comes along and starts, or she comes along, whoever, they start suggesting different ways of setting up their systems. Right. So, and by the way, we also have a whole IT. You can outsource your IT support for us. Yeah. Oh, I've got a guy who comes in and said, no, that's fantastic. But the little bits, and sometimes you have an IT person in the room going, yeah, the bits I hate doing. You've just won over the IT guy. Or alternatively, like you've got so-and-so, yeah, he would be in charge, but he would be in charge of the setup. We would just basically, so they could spend more time on that and doing the more interesting thing. And this IT guy before was like that, I think, is what you're trying to actually do. And I think if you can do that to help because people need to change and they're very concerned and they're not sure, when you've got them thinking differently, or you're asking questions that help them think differently, not just badgering them nonstop. Because I think, as Patrick said, your brain's going to blow up, right? But those little few questions here and there, because you've done your homework, you are in the top league of salespeople you're going to speak to.
So it should be this simple. I know sometimes I sound like I oversimplify things. Okay, maybe that's a fault of mine.
I think that's a good.
Well, I hope so.
Patrick, that is actually, I think, one of your biggest strengths, in my humble opinion, for what it's worth. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I just try to boil things down. So it kind of comes down to this. And I was on a podcast yesterday with the guys from Microsoft and an AI company, and it's actually up. If you go into my stream, you can see it. It's still there. It's about an hour. It's these guys were so sharp. But we got talking about just about proposals. All right. So you're sort of talking about the engagement. I'm talking about what does your business case do when you're not there? You see, this is so important. So you're talking about photocopiers. I know more about photocopiers than the average guy who sells them. And you might say, why is that? Because I was Canada's first certified print production practitioner. It takes 2 years to get that designation. I talk about things like undercolor removal. I talk about the fact that we don't use black when we print 4 colors anymore. It's what they do is they take all the shadow tones out of the 3 base colors to create the 4th color. I won't bore you. But here's the thing. What you have to be able to do is present something in under 8 pages, preferably about 4, and say to the person, please take this home to your husband or your wife. And if you can't explain it to them in very simple language, then you have to come back to me, because there's no way you can sell that internally, because the hardest sale you will ever make in your life is the internal one.
Yeah. And I agree, Patrick. And just to reiterate what Joran said about simplicity, I believe, like, I read a lot of sales books, and there's a lot of these NLP strategies, all these things. And like, I often wonder, do people try and overcomplicate a process? And I don't believe sales is easy for 1 second,
No, it's
right?
not. No.
And so here it's complicated. It's a what I like to say about sales is complex. Don't make it complicated because it's already complex.
Right there.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right. So you have to make sure, like, yes, I'm a process guy, right? So I love to build, well, what are the key things I need to do to get this account, right? And then I look at the process, all the back end stuff that I need to do to prepare, then to get the actual meeting itself, then in the meeting, the touch points. How do I influence the touch points to ensure I give myself the best chance of that person seeing who I really am and how I can help them, how I can support their goals,
And why?
and why exactly.
And here's the reason why. I, People don't want to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it. Business breaks regularly. Things go wrong. So just because you sold a good solution doesn't mean that it's so perfect it replicates. Just back to the how many times does a photocopy machine jam a day?
Yep.
I don't know, 6, 8, 10 times. So here's the thing. Once you sell a product, do you have the courage to do the follow-up to say, all right, there are always issues with using anything that's mechanical. Always. They have to be maintained, they have to be updated, and all the rest of the stuff. Would you please just sit me down and share your frustrations with me so that I can take that away from you?
Absolutely. So we're thinking about today, we're talking about adapting to change, agile strategies within sales leadership. So it's a big conversation in itself, because as leaders, we need to make sure that our teams are flexible and agile. I think agile is a big word in itself. And I think we started the conversation off talking about the customers and their pain points. And I think that's a really good place to start. But what else is there that we can actually do? Because that's one area. But it's having those ways and conversations with our team that they're more flexible than ever before. They bounce off each other because everyone's different. Some are more analytical minded. And I think, Shay, you're probably more analytical minded as opposed to me. I'm a little bit more creative mindset in a way, but I think we bounce in and out of these as well. But how do we orchestrate that as the conductor, as a leader, to make sure that everyone works in congruence, in line, and they're sharing ideas and they're impactful, but they're adapting to changes that will happen throughout the year. Last year was the tech layoffs, and that made a big difference to the sales pipeline and everything else that impacted that across. But how can we adapt that through uncertainty? Because certain things do happen. We know that COVID and everything else, I hope we've long gone out of that, but this year there might be other things, but we have to sort of weave around it. But how do we do that as a team to make sure that we're ahead of the game and we're highly flexible, but we're highly educated in really understanding the market and the market trends? Where do we need to navigate through that?
Like, Jason, this, I believe, is the magic bullet when it comes to sales teams, right? Because I've supported many sales teams over the years, and there's a common theme I see where a lot of the actual account managers, the salespeople, are quite individualistic.
Yep.
They're self-starters, they're great motivators, but they like to work on their own. And trying to get that gel together, I believe, is the first thing that needs to be done by any sales leader, is to get them to gel together and share information, share what's working so everybody can thrive and create that synergy between them. Because if I tell you something, Jason, that worked for me in a sale, and then you use it, it helps you, then you're going to reciprocate, right? And to get that reciprocation, number one for me is always the big one. Second of all, Jason, along with that,
I agree. I totally agree with that.
yeah, it's all about having a model where everybody is supporting each other, and you're looking at like the leading metrics, right, to see what's working well, what's not, what do we need to change, and how do we do it together as a team, right? It's not about Jason or Patrick or Jorn, they're having a bad month, leave them to it. It's about, well, how can we help you? What's not working? Where do you need help? How can I support your goals? And it's about building that adaptability within the team, because things change. And when you're looking at data, and data is great, right? However, data can be overwhelming. It's about sticking to those key performance. And I have a term that I don't know if someone else has used it, but everywhere I go with sales and marketing, I see this situation of EPI, every performance indicator, and the key ones get lost. The drivers that will actually influence your performance, you don't know what they are.
Yep.
So it's all about building the foundations first, and then from there being able to react and adapt really promptly as things change, as everybody struggles. How do you get out of the problem together?
Completely concur with everything that you've said there. Patrick, Joran, adding in your 2 words about that and the team dynamics as well, because that's Agile as well. The strategies, the flexibility.
You go first, sir.
Thank you. I think Shay actually hit the sharing is incredibly valuable. Very, very important. I think one of the questions people have of me is, and this is what we mean by team players, because I think there is the fact when you share, if sales is competitive, everybody wants to be number one. But when people feel they're part of a team, they tend to do better. They will help each other out. So what you're going to have is number one's doing great, the number two starts catching up. Number one's not going to give up, so number one goes up. I've seen this, by the way, it's happened to me. And you see that number one's doing a lot better, number two's doing a lot better, number 3, 4, 5, 6 are like, that's how much money we can make. They'll be doing a lot, even if still 3, 4, 5, 6, the average goes up. It's a team people want to be on. I will think it goes to a very simple question. If you've got people who can't do this and can't interact, you've got 2 options. One is you take them off a team and they're just sitting by themselves. They are known not to be the team. By the way, only do that if they sell. Because I really think if somebody cannot interact with other people, and again, it depends how it's managed. If it's annoying and it's frustrating and people rather be selling, they'll be elsewhere. Like, make it where you can't put this. Sometimes probably got 100 salespeople. If you've got that bigger team, they're all in a room, and a lot, let's say 85% of them are getting something out of it, 15% aren't, and they're thinking, I could be speaking to 16 people during this time. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. That I think is important. Now, sometimes you may have to say to them, listen, once a month, an hour, I want you in there. I want you to give insights, right? Make them part of this. And I think if somebody is not really performing and not willing to interact, if somebody's becoming a weight and dragging it down, you might have a serious question about should they be on your sales team at all. Again, if they sell like there's no tomorrow, it might be a price worth paying, and just everybody knows they're that person out there, right? It might be. And also depends how people, because some people could be, I remember somebody who was grumpy as hell. Don't speak to him during the day. Come 5 o'clock, he'll have all the time and he'll help you out tremendously. He'll still be grumpy. I never saw him smile. I remember I once needed help and he said, I said, do you have a chance? He said, not now. If it can wait till 5, I'm yours. And at 5, he was muck rock. So that could be misconstrued. At 5 o'clock, he really was fabulous. The way he explained it, the way he broke it down. I was trying to pitch a private equity. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was very young, inexperienced. Within 10 minutes, I knew it backwards. This guy's amazing. He wasn't the person who's always the best at when we got together and then we shared experiences about what's gone really right, what's got really wrong. But there's a lot you can do. I think sometimes talking about something, if somebody shares something that's going really, really well for them, is a good one. And then let's say somebody's got the bravery to share something which they're not going brilliantly well, which just did not go right at all, and what they learned from it, or people got suggestions, will cover a big chunk of people as well. You also have those who may just say, this is my situation, I'm stuck, who's got ideas, and vet it beforehand. You also, I think I mentioned this as well, as a manager, you'll start to see who's more helpful and who's not.
Do you know
That's
what's
absolutely-
really important? Not a lot of people want to talk about this, but I'm the guy. When you hire, you have to hire for culture. You have to hire for attitude. And the last one or two interviews should be done by the team, not by the manager. Because if the team raises any red flags, then you've got a huge problem because they understand their own cohesiveness better than the sales manager at times. Because they do that interaction. Go ahead.
I like to agree and disagree. I think it's got to be somebody who can be cohesive and work with a team. But at the same time, a team can sometimes get intimidated, or a team likes something. I've seen this. As you know, I was on the board until recently of a company, an organization which was trying to help people from what we call underserved backgrounds build a path to financial success through a career in sales. And we would train them, etc. And bluntly, in the greater New York area, let's be honest, they're not white, usually. So you hit the diversity tick. I learned very quickly, most people, they talk about diversity. What they mean is, I want somebody exactly like me.
No.
Yeah.
That's not exactly where I was going. But I honestly, I appreciate you saying that because now you're getting to the germ of it. Here's the germ. If everybody is identical on a team, all you've really got is one mind.
Mm.
Okay. So I always, when I would go in with pitch teams to pitch large pieces of business, and it was very complicated. And let's say that the pitch was somebody here talked about data, but let's say it was data-based. I would say, okay, data person, you're the pitch person. What I am is I'm the counterpuncher in the room. Okay, so if things get a little bit offline, then you can just kind of rest for a little bit, and then I'll sort of bring us back into congruence, and then you can go back at it again. But the thing is, it's not always the sales guy that should be leading the pitch. It's not logical. A couple of other small things, okay? If you don't have a philosophy within your company on how things are bought and sold, shame on you, okay? And you might say, well, why? It's because we all get lost. We all get lost for periods of time. I've got friends who read this book once a year. Once a year.
What is that book? Sorry, I didn't quite read it.
It's Perpetual Hunger. They read it once a year because it's a reset book. I created that. So I was approached by the Global Minister of Entrepreneurship and Economic Development from the United Nations to write it. So I thought, if I'm going to write something, it better be something that I can live with for a long period of time. And so what I did was I built a book that was a source book, a field book, and a workbook all at the same time. There's only a few that have really understood it. But here's the weird part. About 20% of the book is the philosophy of how you get this going every day so that you don't just get out of bed and sit there inside your bed. Oh, man, we got to go do it again. No, it's the opposite. It's like, I have the ability to do it again. So that then gets stacked, okay, down below. And Shay, I know you're really big on this. Jason, I know you're big on it. I presume that you are as well. It's where are you in the customer buying process? Because here's the thing. They're never going to start at your beginning. They're going to start where they want to start.
Yep.
So what you have to do is, let's say that they start at the very end, which is really weird, but it happens all the time. How many times have people called you up and said, Yoram, before you come in, I want a price? I'm just saying. So the challenge is, well, you haven't answered my 6 questions. I know, but I gotta, the only way you get in the building is if I get to talk to my executive team to say this is approximately what it's going to cost, and then we'll let you know whether we've got the budget. So I've had an interesting conversation very recently. One of the hardest things to get these days is to get somebody to tell you when their planning starts. It's really hard. I had a guy who was sitting there talking to me one day, and he's going, you know what, Pat? He says, you're into some really cool stuff. And he just said, I don't normally share this, but here's when our planning starts, and I want you to be ready. And by the way, I work with hundreds of companies.
Can I just say one thing about that? Sorry, and I'll throw it back to you guys. I think there is a very important point you raised. I think there a couple of things. Number one, I think if you're being asked prices, you've got to give a bit of a range. I used to say, listen, it's not going to be a few hundred, it's not going to be hundreds of thousands either, or millions, whatever it may be. So you set an expectation.
Yeah.
Now, again, you may have people where they're automatically comparing you, especially if you're selling a product which is a bit different. They like to pay something else which is in the hundreds. You'll get charged in thousands per seat, but it's like a whole different ball game, and it's going to transform your company. They may price you out, and I say, compared to what? That's obviously the big question. I think another point that's for being point, I think you talked about having everybody the same. There's been a big thing, people, and somebody told me this. I've actually heard this. I have this theory where people would say, there's research that when people hire people who've been recommended by existing employees, they stay longer. It may be true, but somebody told me, which something I always suspected, I've heard this, he said he always trusted his top salesperson. He'd never seen me wrong.
That's right.
And he looked at his team, and they're quite gender-wise, they're diverse. Color-wise, they're diverse. Frankly, they're not all heterosexuals either. Some are gay, some, either way they're open. But he said, they're all the same person. He said he literally hit them. They're good, but they're the same person. He said this to his manager. He says to the top salesperson, he said, I was thinking exactly the same thing. I mean, I love every single person here, and we're doing really well, but can we do a bit better? Can we bring somebody in who's a bit more live, whatever it may be. I also think it's very important as well of how you phrase things. I just want to put this very carefully, and something you raise at the beginning when they know it's coming, right? Don't just sound, listen, somebody talked about the feel, fail, found method, right? At the beginning, you can say somebody's just phrased ridiculous objections. Oh, it's too expensive, we'll never get our returns. I understand what you're saying. People always said that at the beginning. If somebody asks you a question and they raise an objection, which you've heard a million times, in the middle of a conversation on the second or third meeting, right? When you're actually having a serious conversation, you said, somebody told me once this, I understand what you're saying. The guy stopped him, said, if you use the feel, felt, sound method, if you use the feel, felt, foul method, I'm throwing you out the room. So the feel, felt, foul method is not dead, right? What happened was you simply sounded like you didn't care. You sound like you weren't paying attention. But the concept is good. If you've said to him, I understand, you'll not be surprised. I've heard that. That's come up before. Before I sort of go into how we're dealt with it, let me be clear on what's actually holding you back. You say this, is there anything else? Or I want to understand what's behind this objection, right? Suddenly it's like, okay, he's overcome it. It's true. It's the same thing. He's come across this. I've overcome it. I'm not the first person to think about this, but I'm focusing on me. And that goes back to the same thing, by the way, about the challenger thing. And I think that's what people do a lot wrong, where we're trying to get them to ask questions of their customers, right? And they say, I've said it and I got thrown out, it didn't work. Because they're not salespeople like us sometimes. Or maybe sometimes they are. But they're not, we assume they think like us. They're not. They could be consultants. They're brilliant people. They could be investment professionals. They could make billions for a year in returns on their investments, right? They may be managing like 10-figure sums, but don't assume they're just like us and they think like us. And I think that is, one of the big things that people have to think is, when we're saying adapting all the time, the concepts may be the same, but just saying the same words or acting the same way sometimes works, but sometimes can be lazy. When you get pushback, sometimes some people, whatever you say, it's not going to work, or you just got the wrong day. But think about, is it what I'm actually doing, or is it the way I'm my heart is in the right place, but am I presenting in a way where they feel like...
Yeah, you know what? You don't want to be taking sandpaper and rubbing it over people's skin, for God's sakes. I mean, so the way that I will compress all of that into one sentence is, we sell unique solutions to unique customers.
So this is what I'm thinking is, and I know we're hitting the witching hour, and I know Shay has a meeting in imminent. So something I learned quite recently is to ace it. So as a team manager, director, everything else. So when you come back to your team, what you should be saying is, did you adapt to everything? Did you act in the right manner? Did you access to the right people? So the C is, did you produce the right context to the conversation? Were you curious enough that it was meaningful and you understood them? And did you have great, wonderful conversations with them and create that narrative and those stories behind everything that you say? Did you educate them? Did you educate the marketplace? Because when you sell, you're educating. Did you empower? Did you engage with them? And when you ace things, you breaking it down into a simple, simplistic way to make sure that your team are acing everything that they do within the conversations that they have with the clients, customers, potential customers that they have. Like as Patrick said, simplify it. And that's one of the ways to simplify it.
What I love about that, Jason, is, and I don't necessarily use the ACE, but what I always say, the questions are the answers. The more you question people on certain topics, the more you prime them to think and do a certain way. And that eventually builds really strong habits in the right direction, and results will follow over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I think that organizations miss, and it's one of the things that I did when I was in corporate. So we were all selling the same thing, but we were using different language to do it. And that is confusing in the marketplace. Okay? Like, you can't have that. And I remember sitting with my people and just saying, all right, I'm hearing people use 3 different words to say the same thing. And that, my friends, has to stop.
Yeah.
Now, it's not that we all sound robotic. It's that when we appear in front of a customer and our customer talks to one of their customers or colleagues and they say, well, Pat called it this and Yorm called it that, but to me it's the same thing. Which one of those guys do you trust?
Yeah.
And therein lies a huge problem. So it has to be a cultural thing where the management team is sort of setting the table in saying, friends, if we do not communicate in a way that our customers, when they go to conferences, they say, oh, I talked to Shay, I talked to Jason, I talked to Yorm. You know what? These guys have got this thing about how they solve problems. And it's not that I really care about the methodology. It's the way they explain value. It's the way they explain their point of difference. It's the way that they're able to articulate their super differentiators with just total fluidness. It's clarity. It's not. And by the way, you're going to get into horrible discussions with people. And one of the things that I've learned about the negotiation community, this is fascinating stuff, by the way, is can you stay curious when you're frustrated and angry?
I had that conversation with someone else today, and everything that the emotions can override it, but sometimes you have to bring it back down to be calm. And when you're annoyed and frustrated, are these tools, techniques, processes, can they fall out the window, or can you deal with them? Or can you just take a step back and go, take a breath? And that's the strategy.
The way that I deal with this, and let me just talk about my family, okay? Because my family oftentimes are my business associates. I hate to say it, but that's the way it is.
Ooh, sorry.
No, I get it. I totally.
Treat
your family like your customers.
Patrick.
You treat your best customers like family, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I say when things get way offline is I get very quiet, and I probably ask a couple of questions. Number one, can you just go back to having peace in your heart? That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, what is blocking you from making a decision?
Yeah, good question.
You want to know why that last question is important? It's because we live in a free society. And when somebody says, what's blocking you, Shay? You go, nothing's blocking me. Oh, well, if nothing's blocking you, then what's the solution? What's your idea of a perfect deal? And here's another cool one for you. Let's say that you're not going to get a deal done. It happens all the time, right?
Yep.
So what you do is you stop the person and say, we're not getting a deal done today, are we? Yorm, you've come in at a price point that's either too low or too high. So we're not going to get a deal done, right? So the question you ask is, if we could have got a deal done today in a perfect world, what would it look like to you and what would the pricing be?
Yeah.
And here's the reason why.
Yep.
Here's the reason why. Tomorrow, the person that they did choose could turn out to be a total loser. And they realize it. And they're sitting there going, oh my God, I pulled the wrong lever.
That's
Better
powerful.
call Yoram back. Better get Yoram back in the room. Get Shay and Jason back in the room. Why? Well, because they asked that question. And you know what you know when you enter that room? Perfect pricing.
Yeah.
Perfect value.
And that's a brilliant strategy, Patrick. And I came across this accidentally when I was that person that I was apparently too high in the beginning, and they came back to me, and I realized that was a powerful strategy to keep doors open, right? Because when things don't go according to plan with their initial preferred vendor, who's next? And it's a brilliant strategy to keep the
So I
doors
have a
open.
philosophy that I share with these types of clients. All right. So I've lost more than my fair share. All right. You got to hold your hand up and say, yeah, that was me. So what I do, okay, when they make the hard decision, but it's not me, I often say to them, can I run beside you? And they go, what the hell does that mean? And I said, you know what? Business changes happen all the time from within companies. Cultures change. Companies get bought. Companies get sold. People leave. Leadership changes. Profitability changes. Commoditization changes. All kinds of things change. And all I want to do is be standing beside you in case you look over and you say, oh, God, this is awful. What do you think? And that's when the door swings open.
Awesome. Love it. I think we've hit the witching hour. That was awesome. And I'm going to borrow some of those, what you said today. And we've written it down. And this is going through all of the other channels. So, yeah, we really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation. We're going to carry on with this format of video as opposed to the audio for a little bit longer, because I think it's hugely powerful from what we're saying. Plus, it gets shared amongst all of our social platforms if you've managed to do that. And hopefully I've done it on Instagram today as well. Fingers crossed if that's worked. So lots of food for thought today. And I'm absolutely gobsmacked from where we started and where these conversations have gone. So any final words or one word from each person will be a good point. Otherwise, we're here all day.
Yeah, I'm going to start just something to segue back to what you said about diversity. That totally resonated with me. And I'm going to say, when it comes to your teams, diversity is important. However, choose diversity deliberately.
Yeah. Yoram.
I actually going to say on that, one of the most diverse teams I went on, the guy had no intention to be diverse at all. He just went looking for the best people and tried very hard to make sure he had nothing like stopping him. And the end, we used to joke he's the only white straight guy, the white Christian straight guy. I think it's try and be where the customers are or your prospects, not where you think they are. Sorry,
my effective communication has fallen on its head. I said one word from everyone.
All right, kiss. Keep it short and sweet. Kiss. Keep it short and sweet.
Patrick, I can rely on you. Effective communication and good listening skills here, Patrick.
Take a deep breath.
Love it. And I'm going to steal one of yours, Patrick, is run alongside you. How can I run alongside you? I love that. I'm going to borrow and steal that. That's excellent.
Do you know what you do to effect that? So we all know there's long close sales. We know that, right? So when you do that, what you're asking the customer for is permission to communicate with them on a semi-regular level. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like this. You could just send them an article here's what I used to do. Okay, I'm boring, but I would pull off articles. I would highlight the pieces that were germane to their industry and them that might not have come up in their executive management's team because the thing is so damn new. I would put it in an envelope and just send it with my business card, and that was it.
Awesome. Everyone, have a great day. Make sure it counts. Enjoy the moment.
Thanks a lot, everyone.